The story of the Ginsburg family in Howell, Michigan really begins in 1928. My grandparents, who were Ukrainian Jews, emigrated first to England in 1908 and then to the United States in 1910. They wound up in Kimball, West Virginia, where my grandmother's brothers had a furniture business that my grandfather worked in. My grandfather decided that there might be better opportunities for his family in Michigan. How he wound up in Howell is really anybody's guess. But he bought a piece of property at 1018 East Grand River Avenue. He built 2 houses on the property, a house on one side for his 3 sons, Abe, Izzy, and Harry, and a house on the other side for himself, my grandmother, and his daughter, Faye. In between the 2 houses was an auto wrecking yard, Ginsburg's Used Auto Parts. His business did so well that by 1935 he was able to expand. He bought a second store building at 214 West Grand River Avenue and opened Ginsburg Auto Parts, a Firestone affiliate store. Now in those days they sold tires, batteries, auto parts, home appliances, radios, bicycles, and tools. It's kind of like the Western auto stores of the 50s and 60s. The business evolved, gradually moving exclusively to new auto parts. In 1940, my grandfather died, and his 3 sons took over the running of the business. Abe primarily ran the East Grand River used auto parts business, which had also gone into auto glass and mufflers. My father, Harry, ran the new auto parts store on West Grand River Avenue. With the start of the Second World War, my uncle Abe enlisted in the U.S. Coast Guard. My father had severe rheumatoid arthritis and was given a draft deferment. He ran the new parts business. Izzy, who had a deformed leg from childhood, was also draft exempt. He ran the used auto parts business on East Grand River Avenue, which was also a recycling center. With the war effort, people were trying to recycle all kinds of metals, steel, tin, iron, copper, anything that could be used to make weaponry. When Abe returned from military service in 1945, the brothers decided that it was time to split up the businesses and go their separate ways. Izzy decided to work with my father at Ginsburg Auto Parts. Abe took over the used parts business and made it into Abe's Auto Parts. It eventually evolved into Abe's Auto Glass. He ran the business successfully until 1963 when he sold it to Glen Fogle and Stan Lalewicz. In 1952, my father's ill health caught up with him. He moved into semi-retirement, selling Ginsburg Auto Parts to Orland Young, who owned the Nash dealership across the street. He and my mother and my 2 sisters, Roseann and Shirley, moved to Florida. I was born down there. While he was in Florida, my father became very active in a local chamber of commerce on Indian Rocks Beach. In 1958, he was offered the opportunity to come back and form the Howell Chamber of Commerce. We moved to the duplex my parents owned at 121 and 123 North Center Street, just across from the Carnegie Library. We stayed in Howell for 2 years before my father got a better opportunity and we moved to Newcastle, Indiana. In 1964, Howell Auto Parts vacated the building that my parents owned and moved into the old Howell Armory next to the theater. My father had an empty store building, and he and his brother Izzy decided to go back into the auto parts business. Before the new business could come to fruition, my Uncle Izzy passed away at age 52 in November of 1964. My father went ahead with their dream and opened Advanced Automotive Incorporated in June of 1965. I grew up working in that business. In 1969, ill health caught up with my father again, and he had a massive heart attack. I was 14 years old and was thrust into the family business working at Advanced Automotive on a regular basis after school and on the weekends. A regular customer of our store was Burt Thomas, a disc jockey at WHMI whose studios were just across the street and above the Shippey paint store. Burt knew I had an interest in radio broadcasting and encouraged it. He actually helped me get a part-time job. And at age 15, I was working Saturday mornings 6 to 10 a.m. as a disc jockey at WHMI. Now, you weren't just a disc jockey in those days. You were also the newsman, the weatherman, you read the commercials, and you ran the transmitter. So I had to obtain an FCC third-class radio telephone operator's license. The wonderful thing about small-town radio stations, especially in those days, is it gave starting broadcasters a place to hone their skills. And I did that at WHMI over a number of years. I got better and better and was soon given more and more responsibility at the station. At the same time, I was very actively involved in the running of our family's auto parts business. Unfortunately, my father's health never improved, and he passed away in November of 1976. We sold the family business just a month later. In the spring of 1977, I returned to East Lansing to work on my education full-time at Michigan State, working toward a degree in radio and television broadcasting. Did I ever have a big career in broadcasting? The answer is no. I went to work for a small automotive parts distributor while I was in college, and that evolved into a career with CarQuest Auto Parts. In October of 1985, I took a marketing job with the CarQuest Auto Parts Distribution Center in Bay City. Just a year later, I was promoted to Director of Advertising for the corporation and brought to Raleigh, North Carolina. The skills that I acquired at WHMI served me very well over the years. I was the voice of CarQuest Auto Parts for many, many years in radio and TV commercials and in corporate videos. I had the opportunity to work with country music stars Roger Miller and Roy Clark in TV commercials. I was also very involved in corporate events, hiring people like Ronnie Milsap and the group Three Dog Night to perform at CarQuest functions. I even performed in a TV segment for ITV in England, working with Engelbert Humperdinck in 2000. But the most important job that I did during those years was the raising of two terrific sons. They're grown men now, and we have two grandchildren too. I often think about growing up in Howell, what a great safe place it was, and what wonderful, kind people were there. It was a place where you could ride your bike all over town as a kid. You could go to a movie for 25 cents or get a hamburger at Anthony's Dairy Mart for 15 cents. Some of the best times in my life were spent on Howell Lake, being taught how to swim by Susie Schnackenberg and Ward Gremore. In my early 20s, I had a Starcraft Skylark Sailboat and often went out on Howell Lake after work. It was magnificent. The sound of the wind in the sail and the water gurgling behind the boat. And if you got a good enough wind, getting up in the hiking position on the boat and running the length of the lake. It was pure magic. While Howell changed a lot in the early 70s because of the white supremacists who moved into the area, I will never forget all of the decent and kind people who I encountered growing up in that community. People who didn't have a racist or bigoted bone in their bodies. People who represented the very best of small town life. Sadly, when I go back to Howell today, the vast majority of people I know are now permanent residents at Lakeview Cemetery. Although, there are a lot worse places to be.